What's up, guys? It's Twilight. Today's topic is healing the mother womb. I hope to add a little bit more substance and content to what you have already studied. I'm also going to look at this from the psycho-spiritual effects of the Black community. We haven't been as forthright as a community about discovering the pain within. Now, I also want to make note that this is a paid and sponsored video. So if you like what you hear and you want to ask a specific question about any topic on metaphysics or healing, you can just simply go to the comment section, make a small donation, provide your video topic, your email, and go ahead and release it directly on YouTube. Now, also, if you like what you hear, you want to smash that like button, go ahead and shoot a comment, share it with a friend to help the YouTube algorithm. That said, what is a mother wound? A mother wound is when the feminine, nurturing aspect of any gender has been exploited or has been damaged in some way. So again, it is when the nurturing and feminine aspect of any gender has been exploited or is out of balance and dysfunctional. So let's go ahead and take a look at what feminine characteristics are. Now, we talk a lot in the spiritual community about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So when you are thinking about feminine nurturing things, you must first understand what these characteristics are. Not gender specific, nor am I talking about being female. I am talking about certain characteristics, attributes that everybody should carry within them to be a whole, healthy adult. So let's go ahead and look at the feminine qualities. In general, feminine qualities are noted as being receptive, being contractive, being intuitive, being inward, giving of nurturing, tenderness, kindness, intuition, ease, allowing, surrender, flow, radiance, stillness. What is a wounded feminine? A wounded feminine is a victim, someone who feels very powerless, who base their self-identity and self-worth off of external opinions, codependency, a fixer, someone who comes in and fixes the problem for other people, self-neglect, needy, manipulating, withholding, over-emotional. Those are some of the aspects of a wounded feminine. Okay? Now, what is interesting is if you look at the wounded masculine, which is these characteristics include perpetrator, abuse of power, dominance, aggression, control, competitive, abusive, cold-hearted, cruel. If you look at the wounded feminine and the wounded masculine, all of these characteristics describe people with high narcissistic tendencies. So it's just interesting to note that when you are looking at these internal woundings, if you are wounded on both sides by both your mother and your father, you could be potentially looking at someone with high narcissistic characteristics. The mother is seen as the expression of God to a child. Your mother is your first sustaining life giver. She's your first God. Now, people will say, okay, well, that's a weighted statement, etc., etc. But let's think about it. The child is nurtured in the womb for 9 months, theoretically, and is receiving their food, their care, their substance, their life force inside this body. Now, that's not to negate the seed that was planted by the masculine, but this child germinated in this woman's womb for 9 months. That is a connection that is very, very supernatural, and it can't be ignored. When a woman is carrying a child and is connected through their umbilical cord, the child is not only receiving food and nourishment, but is also receiving information from the energy that the mother carries in her frequency, in her emotional body. Now, it's interesting to note that a mother wound is also referring to someone who is dealing with generational trauma or a passed down set of traits, consciousness, and responses to life that has been noted due to generational trauma in the past. So that is an important pivotal part to highlight when the child is being nurtured in the womb. Then the woman gives birth to the child, and theoretically most mothers will breastfeed for a certain amount of time. The breastfeeding then is also the child's first awareness that something outside of themselves can take care of them. They don't know of any religion or any God in particular. All they know is this is my sustainer. And when I need milk, food, Pampers, she is generally seen to be the one that would provide that for me naturally. Children know that they are always yearning for a connection with their mother, no matter what. Now, how is this leading to the mother womb? So you have two very important elements. You have a wounded feminine, and then that wounded feminine was created through the wounding that you experienced with the feminine principle of God that you became most familiar with. Whether your mother was there and she was not emotionally there for you, or if she wasn't there at all, or if she was there but she was emotionally erratic and violent, or she was someone who just simply did not get you. There was a personality mismatch. She was more in tune with her own needs, and you stepped up to the plate to become accommodating to her due to her not being able to properly nurture you due to her likely having her own set of issues. This is what leads us to a mother wound. Now let's go ahead and look at some of the aspects of the Black family structure and the historical events starting from the 1960s. Now, obviously, we know about slavery. We know about Jim Crow. We know about the vile way that Black people were treated in this country. But just to highlight, even just these 4 things that I'm about to mention have such a big impact on the breaking down of the structure of the Black family. So we have the women's right movement, also known as the women's liberation movement, between 1960 and 1970. This was a spin-off of feminism, which started in the 1860s when the woman who was a free woman, which most likely was a Caucasian woman of elitist status, felt that she was being oppressed by her men. It wasn't until about the 1960s that it co-opted with the civil rights movement to include Black women who were theoretically free, but they were not economically free. So if we look at that situation, how the Black woman was exploited during the women's right movement because of her discontentment with her social positioning in the home, you can see that this was a direct hit of the mother womb overall to the black community. So you got the women's movement, a massive mother womb blow to the black family structure, because it was not highlighting feminine principle, but it was shifting the power dynamic. Then you have redlining, which occurred from the 1960s to the 1970s. I believe that to be a hit against the masculine as it relates to black men. Redlining dealt with separating and segregating certain zip codes to exclude black families from being able to buy property in certain areas. So this was a government regime that fortified the wealth gap and disrupted black families from being able to pass along generational wealth through the acquisition of property. And the reason why this was more so a hit against the masculine principle, because this disrupted his ability to provide for his family and create legacies in a meaningful way, which was something that most Americans, not people of color obviously, did have access to at that time to create generational wealth. So in this particular case, black people were marginalized by not being able to acquire property and pass down that property to their offsprings. The crack epidemic, 1986 to 1989. So here we are, we're dealing with a festering mother wound, a festering father wound, and they go ahead and they give us substances like crack. You see how this is going, how the snowball is going downhill here. Okay, so you got people who are hurting, who are in pain, who need to restructure their family, who need to economically evolve, who need spiritual liberation, and instead they are given crack, which was also noted to be something of a government regime. Then you follow that up, now that you have all of these psychologically sick people hooked on drugs, you follow that up with the 1994 crime bill, and you just throw them all in jail, which has proven to disproportionately affect black men, effectively removing them from the home. So what does this look like in real time? This looks like women who are taking on the role of being a feminine, nurturing, and also a masculine. When we are talking about the absence of the fathers in the home, if we are talking about being washed on shore by drugs, confined to certain areas and communities and certain opportunities, being completely marginalized, and having all of these exploitative, systematic regimes come down the pipeline and not dealing with this on any level, spiritually or emotionally. It's not to negate our grandmothers who sat in a church and prayed for us. We want to place value on that. But we also want to be realistic and cognizant of the fact that we also needed psychological assistance, psychological healing, emotional healing, stress management skills, de-escalation skills, understanding the scrutiny and the traumas that had been imposed on us by an alien culture that we didn't ask for. Robbed of our history, robbed of our language, robbed of our culture. So these things alone are enough to have affected people of color for generations to generations to generations. Specifically with the mother wound, we're looking at years upon years of the mother taking on the role of being the disciplinarian as well as the nurturer in the home, and that has had some effect. Now, of course, anyone who did not get what they needed from their mother and they are attempting to reconcile things within themselves now, you're not wrong for pointing out what you didn't get from your mother. But she is not wrong for not having all the tools at the time, because those tools were likely not available. So we do have to be factual on both sides. All right, guys, so that is part 1 of healing the mother womb. I hope that you have grasped the concept here that the mother wound is when we are exploiting the good parts of the feminine principle, like nurturing, and almost utilizing them as a bargaining chip for love, for attention, and for approval. In the next installment, I'm actually going to go over how to work through healing the mother wound and a lot more about some of the systematic injustices that had psychological repercussions on people of color. So what you want to do is you want to go to patreon.com/The Underbelly Group right now, become a Silver Surfer, check out the second video, leave a comment, subscribe. Peace, healing, love yourself.